Have you ever discovered an unusual type of photograph in your old family photograph collection? It's old, but how old? In this video, I'm going to be sharing with you 5 types of old photographs and how to use them as part of your genealogy research. Hey guys, if we haven't met before, I'm Lisa with Are You My Cousin, and this YouTube channel is designed to help you find your ancestor, grow your family tree, but not get overwhelmed in the process. And we're going to have a little fun along the way. So if that sounds like your cup of tea, you're in the right place. Now, family photos are some of our most treasured family possessions. It doesn't matter if they were old or if they were taken last week on the newest cell phone. They are still precious memories and precious images of our families. Now, our children today probably grow up being photographed, well, almost daily. They're used to it. It's commonplace, it's easy, and it's inexpensive. Check with any teen, young adult, or even a grandparent, and you're likely to find hundreds of photographs on that cell phone. I actually think my great-grandmother would have really embraced this whole idea of cell phones and taking photographs, because she and her friends grew up in the Brownie camera era and loved to take photographs of themselves with each other. But this hasn't always been the case. Having one's photograph taken was an occasion. It needed to be planned, and it might have needed to be saved up for, because even candid photographs needed some forethought. And because family photographs were an occasion, they were special. They were oftentimes passed down through the family. And that makes them special. They provide that connection for us with that ancestor that we may never have known. It puts a name from a family tree onto a face. It lets us meet and connect with our ancestors. It also gives us a glimpse into maybe the physical characteristics and traits that we share with our ancestors. Now, these photographs were passed down through the family, but unfortunately, like many of our photographs taken today, they were not labeled. At least my ancestors didn't seem to label their photographs. But what does that mean for us as a researcher? What does that mean for us as family historians as we try to connect with the past and we try to share that with our future generations? Are we out of luck? Are these photographs really just going to be anonymous to us forevermore? No, we actually have some options for that. Now, I talk a lot about old family photographs. I'm going to actually put a link in the description below to a video I've done in the past about identifying individuals in our old family photographs. So what are the first steps we need to take in order to determine who is in that family photograph? Well, the first step is to really understand how old that photograph is, because that's going to tell us who that photo could be of and who it could not be of. And so we need to, in order to understand when the photograph was taken, we need to understand the type of photograph that we are looking at. Photography developed over the years, and we have different photographs from different time periods to help us determine when that photograph was taken. So I'm going to go over 5 with you and a bonus, and let's get started with that. So as we look and start to understand the type of photograph that we might be looking at, they each have their own characteristics that can help place them in a time period. And by placing a photograph in a time period, places that person and that individual in the time period, again, making it easier for us to determine who it possibly could be and rule out who it would not be in that photograph. So the first type that I want to share with you is what's called a daguerreotype. Now, the daguerreotype was popular from the 1840s to the early 1860s. They were typically very small. As you can see, I have one here. They were typically very small. This one's about 2 3/4 inches by 3 1/2 inches. So it's a very small photograph here, and it is in a case. Now, oftentimes we will see in your collections, you might find out that the cases, as this one, actually, because they are so fragile, this one has actually come apart. Now, it came to me this way where it came apart. Now, this was developed by a French photographer, and the way that we know that this is a daguerreotype is that the image is actually kind of a mirror-like. It seems to float on the glass, or seems to float, and let's see if you can see it here. It's a little hard to tell here in the video, but this tends to have that very reflective look to it when you look at it, and the image appears to float. That's sort of how we can help to determine if this is a daguerreotype versus another type of photograph I'm going to show you in just a moment. Now, as I said, the daguerreotypes are very fragile. Oftentimes they did not survive well. The cases may not have survived and may have come apart. They may be missing part of the case. So these are actually very fragile photographs. So we don't have a ton of these. Now, to be honest, I don't actually have any of these of my ancestors. This is actually just a sample that I have here to show you. So I don't typically run into the daguerreotypes in my own family history research, but you might, and I want you to understand when it was being used. So the next type of photograph looks very similar, and it's called an ambrotype. That's going to be, again, the hinged case. Okay, these came about, really were popular between 1855 and about 1865. Again, it is a hinged case. It is still going to be fairly small. Oftentimes, it is confused with the daguerreotype, and that's understandable. But they had a different photography process, and so when you open these up, the image doesn't seem to float. Okay, the image is, I realize it's difficult to see on the video, but it doesn't float. Okay, it doesn't have that real reflective mirror-like image. And that's because the process for creating these ambrotypes puts the image on the glass, whereas the daguerreotype did not. Like the daguerreotypes, are very fragile. And with both of these, when it comes to storing them, you want to make sure you keep them out of light. They are very sensitive to light and temperature changes, so you want to make sure you store them safely. Like the daguerreotype, I don't see many of the ambrotypes in my personal family photo collection. I've yet to actually find one of my own ancestors. That doesn't mean they're not out there, but they were not taken as frequently. This is early photography. Photographs were not taken quite as frequently, and again, it would have been an event to be saved up for from a financial standpoint. So I actually don't have these from my own family. Plus, they were extremely fragile, and if they even existed, they may not have survived through time. Now, next up is the tintype. Kind of started becoming popular around 1856 into the 1890s. So obviously, the tintype was popular for over 30 years, and instead of glass, the image was on an iron plate. Early tintypes were small, and they may have been encased in small cases similar to the daguerreotype and the ambrotype. However, those cases were soon replaced by paper sleeves, many of which never survived time. Now, in the 1890s, those tintypes were actually quite popular at carnivals. And what I love about those particular types of tintypes is that they show our ancestors in a bit more of a casual or fun mode, a relaxed place in their lives. Now, one of the things about the tintype, because it was popular for so many years, to be able to accurately date that tintype, we need to make sure that we are studying the fashions and other clues within that family photograph to date it, to put it in its proper date. I have some more resources for you on learning how to date family photographs in the description below, so I will have that down there. Be sure and pop down there and look at that at the end of the video. Now, in 1859, the carte de visite was introduced. This small photograph was quite popular. It was printed on a thicker cardboard paper. There you go. And they typically were fairly small. A common size was 2.5 inches by 4 inches. The carte de visite was also known as a CDV for short. And the CVDs were often used as like a calling card, very similar to how a calling card was used in the 1850s. The Civil War actually saw a rise in the popularity of the CDV as soldiers and families would exchange photographs. And these were small and easy to carry with them into battle. So a couple things to keep in mind when it comes to dating a CDV. When it comes to the cardboard mount, the thinner the cardboard, the earlier the photograph was. So the cardstock got thicker as we went forward in time. And in general, the earlier CDVs from the 1860s had rounded corners, much like this one, as opposed to the later ones in the 1870s that had a more squared off corner. Those are just a couple of generalized tips that can help you get an approximate starting date for that CDV. So let me know, have you found any carte de visites in your family collection? Let me know in the comments below. Now, in the early 1860s, the cabinet card came into popularity. Now, as you can see, it looks actually very similar to a CDV, but it's bigger. And that's really pretty much the difference. The cabinet card is very similar to that CDV. The size is different, obviously, it's larger, but the cardstock, it's on a thicker cardstock. It's on that cardboard cardstock that would be there. The cabinet card reached its popularity around the 1880s, but I've seen it used all the way into the early 1900s. And because it was used for so many years, we have to use other clues in that photograph and of the card itself, the cabinet card itself, to accurately date to get an approximate date for that photograph. So in general, and these are general guidelines when it comes to looking at that cabinet card to start your process. Later cabinet cards would have beveled edges. They might have more decorative framing around them. You might start to see a scalloped border starting in the mid 1880s. The color of that cardboard the color of the cardboard mount is also important when it comes to dating that particular cabinet card. In general, and these are generalizations at this point, the darker the cabinet card or the darker the color, the later that cabinet card was done. This particular cabinet card that I've been using as an example actually has a maroon color on the back. So this is one of the later ones. This was actually into the 1910s as it turned out. You'll also notice that it has a very elaborate photographer's mark on there. Again, the more elaborate the design, the more elaborate the decoration on the cabinet cards, then the later the date would be. And once again, I do have further resources on these particular types of photos on the website, and I will have the link down below in the description. One of the other ones I wanted to make sure I showed you is that many of us have are these what are called the real postcards. So this is what a real postcard looks like. So it's a thin paper, okay? But if you turn it over, it's literally a postcard that could be addressed and sent. This one has not been sent, obviously, but it could be if they had wanted. Real postcards were popular from about 1907 to up through the 1920s. And because it can be sent through the mail, it has some unique features that can help us as researchers when it comes to identifying our ancestors in these photographs and dating these photographs. Now, one of the important things when it comes to looking at those photographs when you have a real postcard would be to flip it over and look at the back. And if you can see that back, do you see how it has the division right there? So it has an actual line there. It has a division for a spot for an address and a spot for the written message. Early pre-1907 postcards did not have that divided back. That divided back came into play around 1907. So post-1907, you'll have that divided back of the postcard. That tells me that this particular postcard that I showed you is dated after 1907. If you have real postcards that have been sent, that you're in your collection that have been sent or have messages on them, you might see a stamp. You might see a postmark with a date on it. That's always a wonderful way to see. We can get a date, we can get a location, and that can help us to go forward when it comes to identifying that individual in that particular photograph. So in my own personal collection, I tend to have mostly CDVs, that carte de visite, the cabinet card, and the real postcards. Those tend to be the predominant ones that I have for those older ancestors photographs. Now, if you'd like to learn more about caring for this type of photograph, these types of old family photographs, be sure and watch the video on your screen now.